Welcome to another ukulele tutorial. I'm Lara, and today's lesson is on hammer-ons and pull-offs. These are great tools for adding accents to your fingerpicking. First, we'll take a look at technique. I'll show you some great practices that will help you to build the skills in your left hand. Then you're going to want to know how to apply hammer-ons and pull-offs to songs. We'll take a look at the first 4 lines of the song Imagine by John Lennon. Using a very basic finger-picking pattern, we'll look at many different options for adding hammer-ons and pull-offs to this song. I'll point out that I am using a tenor with a low G. If you have a high G on your instrument, you can follow this entire tutorial. Just keep in mind that your 4th string will be 1 octave higher than mine. Now let's start by taking a close look at how hammer-ons and pull-offs are played. Starting off with hammer-ons, in the literal sense, you're going to hammer your finger onto the string. As an example, if we pick our A string and then use our left hand ring finger to hammer onto a C note, here's what it will sound like. I find that it generally helps to have some momentum and movement in my fingers to do hammer-ons properly. Remember that you're not just stopping the note or muting the string, but you're actually hammering on hard enough that you're creating a new note. You can do hammer-ons on any note, and you can use any of the 4 fingers between your index finger and your pinky. Now a pull-off is the opposite movement to the hammer-on, where we're creating a note by pulling off the string. When you do a pull-off on the A string, or the 1st string, it's okay to pull in a downward motion. But keep in mind that for strings 2 through 4, if you pull in a downward motion, you're likely to hit the string below, and that might change the sound of what you're trying to play. So for these other 3 strings, try to pull in an outward motion rather than a downward motion. Just like hammer-ons, you can do pull-offs with any of the 4 fingers between your index finger and your pinky. Now I'll show you a sequence of 3 different practices that you can use to help your left hand learn these techniques. Here's the first of these practices. You can start on any fret, on any string. You'll play the open string and then each finger in sequence. For an easier version of this exercise, you can lift up all of your fingers and only place down 1 at a time that you're using to do the hammer-on. For example, next we'll go in reverse order to practice the pull-offs. For an easier version of this exercise, you can lift up your other fingers and only place down 1 finger at a time that you're using to do each pull-off. For the 3rd part of this practice sequence, we're going to do a combination hammer-on and pull-off. We can start on any fret and any string. I also like to do this exercise going back and forth between my index finger and my ring finger, since I tend to use these 3 fingers the most for hammer-ons and pull-offs. Here's what this sounds like starting on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. As you practice these exercises, be patient and give yourself time for your fingers to build up muscle memory and strength. The goal is to be able to play hammer-ons and pull-offs with each of your fingers and to be able to play them at a relatively consistent volume. Now that you know what hammer-ons and pull-offs are and how to play them, what do you do with them? Let's take a look at the first 4 lines of the song Imagine, and I'll walk you through many different possibilities for adding hammer-ons and pull-offs to a very basic finger-picking pattern. The first 4 lines of this song use 3 chords, and they are G, G major 7, and C. We're going to use a simple finger picking pattern, playing strings 4 down to 1. I'm playing string 4 with my thumb, string 3 with my index finger, string 2 with my middle finger, and string 1 with my ring finger. For each of the 4 lines, we'll play the pattern once on G, once on G major 7, and twice on C. Here's what this sounds like. Now let's take a look at possibilities for hammer-ons, starting with our G chord. The easiest place to start is by looking at the fingering for this chord and try to hammer on to each finger position while playing this finger picking sequence. So for example, if we were to hammer on our index finger onto the 2nd fret of the 3rd string in this pattern, here's what it would sound like. Next, we can try hammering on with our ring finger into this position. And finally, we can try hammering on with our middle finger. So here are 3 possibilities just using this chord shape. You can use any one of these hammer-ons when you play this finger-picking pattern on the G chord in this song. As you develop your skills, you may eventually want to try 2 hammer-ons on the same chord. Here's what this could sound like. Or, if we add just 1 hammer-on from our G chord into this finger-picking pattern, here's what 1 line of this song will sound like. Now let's look at hammer-on options with our G major 7 chord. Starting with hammering on with our index finger. Next we have our middle finger. And finally our ring finger. These all sound good, so these are all great options for using hammer-ons with your G major 7 chord. Now playing our chord sequence and adding in a hammer-on on G major 7 will sound like this. Next we have our C chord, and C uses only our ring finger. So let's try playing this finger picking pattern and see how it sounds if we hammer onto C. It doesn't sound that great. What we can do is experiment with hammering on starting from a different fret rather than from the open string. For example, if we place our middle finger down on the 2nd fret of the 1st string and hammer on to our C note. Let's see how that sounds. That sounds better. So that's one option that you can use to do a hammer-on when you're playing your C chord. Another thing you can do is experiment with hammering on to other notes on the other open strings. For example, if we hammer on to the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, here's what that would sound like. That also sounds good, so it's a second option for a hammer-on when playing your C chord. If you're familiar with the notes in the C chord, when we do this hammer-on, we're starting on E, and we're hammering on to G. G is also played on our 4th string in this chord. It's not essential to learn all of the notes in the chords. You can simply play by ear and experiment by hammering on to different notes. In this case, I just wanted to point out that the G that we're hammering onto is already a part of our C chord. Now let's add one of our C hammer-ons to this chord sequence and see how it sounds. When you start adding hammer-ons to your fingerpicking, you can add them in as often as you'd like, but you certainly don't have to add them in to every single chord of a song. Now I'm going to sing through the first 4 lines of the song using a variety of the hammer-ons that we've just walked through. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. If you're enjoying this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for subscribing. Now you've seen how to use hammer-ons with these chords, so let's take a look next at how to incorporate pull-offs. Now let's look at options for pull-offs with our G chord, starting with our index finger. My preference here is to pull off on the first string using my middle finger. If we incorporate this into our chord sequence, here's what it sounds like. Now moving into our G major 7 chord, you can experiment by doing pull-offs with each finger. My preference here, once again, is to do a pull-off on the first string. Here's what it sounds like if we incorporate our G major 7 pull-off into this chord sequence. And now we've come to our C chord, so let's see what it sounds like if we do a pull-off with our ring finger. It doesn't sound great, but what we can do is place down our middle finger on the 2nd fret, just like we did earlier with our hammer-on. Here's what that would sound like. Now that we've done a pull-off on C to play our B note, we can now do a pull-off on B the second time we fingerpick this pattern on our C chord. Here's what this sounds like. Notice that I didn't pick the first string at the end of the second pattern. I simply played the pull-off on B. If you'd like to pick the first string and play the pull-off, here's what it will sound like. Now just like with hammer-ons, you can play pull-offs wherever you would like. You can sprinkle them around, but you don't have to play them on every single chord. Now I'll sing through the first 4 lines, incorporating some of the pull-offs that we just walked through. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Next, I'll sing through these 4 lines using a combination of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. As with anything new on ukulele, remember to pace yourself and give yourself time for your left hand to really learn these new techniques. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Now have fun practicing your hammer-ons and pull-offs, and thank you so much for watching.